Sarah held her 3-year-old daughter Emma closer as the cold wind cut through their thin jackets. The small-town diner where she worked had closed down 2 weeks ago, and since then, every day had become a battle for survival. Her savings were gone, the rent was overdue. The landlord had given her until tomorrow to pay or leave. Emma's stomach growled loudly. She looked up at her mother with big, trusting eyes. "Mama, I'm hungry," she whispered, her small voice barely audible over the wind. Sarah's heart broke a little more. She had given Emma the last piece of bread that morning, telling her daughter she wasn't hungry when her own stomach ached with emptiness. They walked down Main Street as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the empty sidewalks. Most shops were already closed, their windows dark and unwelcoming. Sarah clutched the crumpled newspaper in her pocket, the one with job listings she had already called about. Each rejection had hit harder than the last. No experience for this job, overqualified for that one. Position already filled for another, as they passed Murphy's saloon. Sarah noticed the warm yellow light spilling from its windows and heard the sound of laughter inside. She stopped walking and stared at the entrance. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind from years ago. "Sometimes, honey, we do things we never thought we would do, just to survive." At the time, Sarah couldn't understand what her grandmother meant. Now, standing in the cold with her hungry child, those words felt like a prophecy. Emma tugged at her mother's coat. "Mama, can we go inside where it's warm?" Sarah looked down at her daughter's pale face and made a decision that would change everything. She pushed open the heavy wooden door, and they stepped into the smoky warmth of the saloon. The conversations quieted as heads turned their way. Sarah felt every pair of eyes on them, but she forced herself to walk to the bar where a heavy-set man with graying hair was wiping down glasses. His name tag read Murphy, and his expression softened when he saw Emma clinging to Sarah's leg. "Don't usually get families in here," Murphy said quietly, his Irish accent thick but kind. "You folks all right?" Sarah swallowed hard, her pride crumbling like old paper. "I was wondering if you needed any help. Cleaning, serving, anything. My daughter and I, we haven't eaten in 2 days, and I'll do whatever work you have." Murphy studied her face, seeing the desperation she was trying so hard to hide. "What kind of work experience you got, miss?" "I worked at Betty's Diner for 3 years before it closed. I can cook, serve, clean. I'm not afraid of hard work." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "I just need to feed my daughter." The saloon had grown completely quiet now. Even the card players at the corner table had stopped their game to listen. Emma pressed closer to Sarah's leg, sensing the tension in the room. Murphy looked at the little girl, then back at Sarah. "The thing is, this isn't really a place for children, if you know what I mean. Most of my customers come here for drinks and other entertainment." Sarah understood exactly what he meant. The women she had seen coming and going from the saloon weren't serving just drinks. Her hands trembled as she realized what she was about to offer, but Emma's hunger made the choice for her. "I understand," she whispered. "I'll do whatever work you need. Just please, can you give my daughter something to eat first?" Murphy's expression grew troubled. He had been running this establishment for 15 years and had seen many desperate people walk through his doors. But something about this young mother and her innocent child stirred something in his chest that he had thought was long dead. Before Murphy could respond, the saloon door opened again, bringing in another gust of cold air. A tall man in a worn cowboy hat stepped inside, his boots clicking against the wooden floor. His clothes were dusty from travel, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent his life working with his hands. The cowboy removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with early silver and eyes the color of storm clouds. He was probably in his late 30s, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of long days under the sun and cold nights under the stars. As he approached the bar, his gaze fell on Sarah and Emma. "Evening, Murphy," he said, his voice low and warm. "Could I get a whiskey and maybe something to eat?" Murphy nodded toward the kitchen. "Sure thing, Jake. Martha's got some stew going. Should be ready in a few minutes." Jake noticed how Sarah tried to shield Emma from view, as if she was ashamed to be there. He saw the way the little girl's clothes, hung loose on her small frame, and how both mother and daughter seemed to be fighting off the cold that had followed them inside. "Excuse me, Jake," said softly to Sarah. "I don't mean to intrude, but are you and your little one all right?" Sarah looked up at him, surprised by the genuine concern in his voice. Most men who came into places like this had different intentions. But there was something different about this cowboy, something that made her feel less afraid. "We're fine," she lied, but her voice betrayed her. Emma chose that moment to speak up. "Mama, you said we could get warm food here." Jake's jaw tightened. As he understood the situation, he had seen enough hardship in his own life to recognize it in others. Without saying another word, he turned to Murphy. "Give the lady and her daughter whatever they want to eat, and put it on my tab." Sarah's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't accept charity. I was just asking Mr. Murphy about work." Jake met her gaze steadily. "It's not charity, ma'am. It's just one person helping another. We've all needed help at some point." Kindness in his voice nearly broke Sarah's composure. She had been prepared to sacrifice her dignity, maybe even her soul, to feed Emma, but this stranger's simple act of generosity reminded her that there was still goodness in the world, even in the darkest moments. Martha emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 steaming bowls of beef stew, the rich aroma filling the air around them. Emma's eyes grew wide at the sight of the food, and she looked up at her mother with hopeful anticipation. Sarah's stomach clenched, with both hunger and embarrassment, as she realized how obvious their desperation must be to everyone in the room. Jake pulled out a chair at a nearby table, away from the rowdier crowd near the card game. "Please, sit down and eat while it's hot," he said gently. "This Montana cold has a way of getting into your bones." As Sarah helped Emma into the chair, she noticed the cowboy's hands. They were scarred and calloused from years of hard work. But his movements were gentle and deliberate. There was something about him that made her feel safe, which was strange considering they were complete strangers in a place she never imagined bringing her daughter, Emma. Dove into the stew with the desperation of a child who had forgotten what a full meal tasted like. Sarah tried to eat more slowly, maintaining some dignity, but her hunger won out. The warm food felt like a miracle, and she had to fight back tears of gratitude. Jake sat across from them, nursing his whiskey, but barely touching his own bowl. "I'm Jake Morrison," he said quietly. "I've got a ranch about 20 miles north of here. Been traveling for the past week, selling cattle in Billings." "I'm Sarah," she replied, wiping Emma's chin with a napkin. "And this is my daughter, Emma. I don't know how to thank you for this. No need for thanks. Mind me asking what brought you to Murphy's?" "No. This isn't exactly the kind of place most mothers would bring their children." Sarah's cheeks flushed red. She had hoped to avoid explaining her situation, but this man's kindness deserved honesty. "The diner where I worked closed 2 weeks ago. We're behind on rent, and I was asking Mr. Murphy about work opportunities." Jake understood immediately what kind of work Sarah was referring to. His expression hardened, not with judgment toward her, but with anger at the circumstances that had driven a young mother to such desperation. "What kind of experience do you have?" he asked. "I can cook, clean, serve customers. I worked at Betty's diner for 3 years. I'm good with numbers." 2. Helped Betty with the books sometimes. Sarah paused, watching Emma eat. "I know it might not sound like much, but I'm a hard worker. Do whatever it takes to provide for my daughter." Jake was quiet for a long moment, studying both Sarah and Emma. The little girl had finished her. Stu N was now leaning against her mother's arm, finally warm and fed enough to let exhaustion take over. Her small face was peaceful in a way that spoke of complete trust in her mother's ability to protect her. "My ranch has been struggling," Jake said slowly. "My housekeeper left last month to care for her sick sister, and I've been managing everything myself. The house is a mess, the books are behind, and I can barely keep up with cooking decent meals between handling the cattle and horses." Sarah's heart began to race. Was he offering her a job? "It's hard work," Jake continued. "The ranch is isolated, and winters can be brutal. But there's a small cabin on the property that needs someone living in it. It has 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a fireplace. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry." "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Morrison?" "I'm offering you a chance, Sarah. Room, board, and wages in exchange for keeping house, cooking, and helping with the ranch books. Emma would be safe there, and when she's old enough, there's a school about 10 miles away. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. After weeks of desperation and the terrible choice she had almost made tonight, this felt too good to be true. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Jake's eyes grew distant, as if he was seeing something from his past. Just say I know what it's like to be alone and hungry. I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Murphy had been listening to the conversation while pretending to clean glasses. Jake's a good man, miss, he said quietly. Known him for years. He's fair and honest, and that ranch of his is a good place. Emma stirred in her mother's arms, looking up sleepily at the cowboy who had fed them. Are you a real cowboy? Asked, her voice soft with approaching sleep. Jake smiled, the harsh lines around his eyes softening.
I suppose I am, little one.
I have horses and cattle, and I wear this old hat everywhere I go. Do you have a horse I could see?
Emma, don't.
Bother the nice man, Sarah said quickly, but Jake held up a hand. I have several horses, Emma. If your mama agrees to come work at my ranch, you could meet them all. There's a gentle mare named Daisy who loves children. Emma's face lit up with excitement, more animated than Sarah had seen her in weeks. Mama, can we go see the horses? Sarah looked between her daughter's hopeful face and Jake's patient expression. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to question why a stranger would offer so much to people he had just met. But another part of her, the part that had been broken down by weeks of rejection and desperation, wanted to believe that this was the answer to their prayers. Mr. Morrison, I appreciate your offer more than you can know. But I have to ask, what? Do you expect from me beyond housekeeping and cooking? Jake met her gaze directly. Just what I said. It's honest work for honest pay. You'll have your own place, your privacy, and my word that you and Emma will be safe and treated with respect. The sincerity in his voice convinced her more than any grand promises could have. Sarah had learned to read people during her years working at the diner, and everything about Jake Morrison suggested he was a man of his word. When would you want us to start? Tomorrow, if you're willing? I know it's sudden, but winter's coming fast, and I could use the help getting everything ready. Sarah thought about their empty apartment, the overdue rent, and the landlord's ultimatum. Then she looked at Emma, who had fallen asleep in her arms, finally peaceful and fed. Mr. Morrison, you've got yourself a housekeeper. The ride to Jake's ranch took them through rolling hills that stretched endlessly under the big Montana sky. Emma sat between Sarah and Jake on the bench seat of his pickup truck, her eyes wide with wonder at the vast landscape. She had never been outside the town limits, and everything seemed magical to her young eyes. Look, Mama. Emma pointed at a group of antelope bounding across a distant field. Are those deer? Jake chuckled. Those are antelope, Emma. They're even faster than deer. Sometimes they race alongside the truck when I'm driving this road. Sarah watched the interaction between Jake and her daughter with amazement. Emma, who had been shy and withdrawn for weeks, was chattering away like her old self. There was something about Jake's calm presence that seemed to bring out the best in people. As they crested a hill, Jake's ranch spread out before them like something from a picture book. The main house was a sturdy log structure with a wide front porch and smoke. Curling from the chimney, several outbuildings dotted the property, including a large red barn and various smaller structures. Horses grazed in fenced pastures, and cattle moved slowly across the distant fields. It's beautiful, Sarah breathed, meaning every word. Been in my family for 3 generations, Jake said with quiet pride. My grandfather built the main house, my father added the barn, and I've been trying to keep it all together since they passed. He pulled up in front of a small cabin set about 100 yards from the main house. It was simple but well maintained, with a stone chimney and windows that reflected the afternoon sun. A small porch faced the main house, and Sarah could see a vegetable garden area that had been prepared for winter. This would be your place, Jake said, climbing down from the truck and reaching up to help Emma down. Let me show you around. The inside of the cabin was modest but comfortable. The main room served as both living area and kitchen, with a stone fireplace that filled one wall. 2 small bedrooms led off the main room, and everything was clean. and well-maintained. Sarah noticed that someone had recently stocked the kitchen with basic supplies. "You did this for us?" she asked, touching the cans of food and fresh bread on the counter. "Figured you might need some basics to get started," Jake said simply. "The bedroom on the left is bigger. Thought you might want that one." Emma could have the smaller room, or you could both stay together. Whatever works best. Emma ran from room to room, delighting in having space to move around. "Mama, look! I can see the horses from this window." Sarah joined her daughter at the bedroom window. In the pasture beyond, several horses grazed peacefully. One, a brown mare with a white blaze on her face, looked up as if sensing their presence. "That's Daisy," Jake said from behind them. "She's gentle as a lamb and loves attention. If you'd like, Emma can meet her properly." "Really?" Emma's face shone with excitement. "Can I ride her?" "We'll start with just getting to know each other," Jake said carefully. "Horses are big animals, and they deserve respect. But Daisy has carried children before." Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since the diner closed, she could see a future that didn't involve daily worry about survival. Emma was already more animated than she had been in weeks, and the cabin felt like a real home. "What time do you need me to start?" "Work tomorrow?" she asked. "How about you take tomorrow to get settled?" Jake suggested. "Day after tomorrow, we can go over what needs to be done. The main house is in rough shape, I'll admit, and the books are a mess. But there's no rush. Want you and Emma to feel comfortable here?" That evening, after Jake had gone back to the main house, Sarah sat by the fireplace with Emma curled up beside her. They had eaten a simple dinner from the supplies Jake had provided, and Emma had taken her first bath in hot water in over a week. "Mama, do you think we can stay here forever?" Emma asked sleepily. Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, still hardly believing their change in fortune. "I don't know about forever, sweetheart, but we can stay as long as Mr. Morrison needs. Our help—" "I like him, Mama. He has kind eyes." Sarah had noticed that too. Despite his rugged appearance and the calluses that spoke of hard physical work, there was a gentleness about Jake Morrison that made her feel safe. Still, she remained cautious. Life had taught her that things that seemed too good to be true usually were. The next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of horses whinnying and cattle lowing in the distance. For a moment, she forgot where they were. Then Emma's excited voice from the other room reminded her of their new reality. "Mama, come quick. The horses are right outside." Sarah rushed to the window to find Daisy and two other horses standing near their fence, as if curious about the new residents. Emma was pressed against the glass, her breath fogging the window with excitement. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Sarah opened it to find Jake standing there with a basket in his hands. "Morning," he said, tipping his hat. "Brought some fresh eggs and milk from the barn. Thought Emma might like to see how we collect eggs, if that's something you'd be comfortable with." Emma appeared at Sarah's side, still in her nightgown. "Can I, Mama, please?" Sarah looked at Jake's patient expression and made a decision. "Let me get her dressed first." 20 minutes later, they walked to the chicken coop behind the main house. Jake showed Emma how to approach the hens gently, how to reach under them carefully for eggs, and how to carry the eggs without breaking them. Emma was initially nervous, but Jake's calm instructions gave her confidence. "These chickens have names?" Emma asked, gently petting a red hen. "That one's Henrietta," Jake said. "Seriously, she's the boss of the whole coop. The white one over there is Gladys, and she's friendly, but talks too much." Emma giggled as if she understood exactly what he meant. Sarah watched from nearby, amazed at how naturally Jake interacted with her daughter. Most men seemed uncomfortable around children, but Jake treated Emma like a small person, worthy of respect and attention. After they finished collecting eggs, Jake led them to the pasture, where Daisy waited by the fence. The mare stretched her neck over the fence rail, clearly hoping for attention. "She likes people," Jake explained to Emma. "But remember what I said about respecting horses. Move slowly, speak softly, and let her sniff your hand first." Emma followed his instructions perfectly, her small hand barely reaching Daisy's soft nose. The mare whickered gently and nuzzled Emma's palm. "Ow. She likes me," Emma exclaimed, her face glowing with joy. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. It had been so long since she had seen her daughter truly happy. The past few months had been about survival, not joy. Now, watching Emma laugh as Daisy gently lipped treats from her small palm, Sarah began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had found more than just a job and a place to stay. 2 weeks into their new life at the ranch, Sarah had established a routine that felt more natural than anything she had done in years. She woke before dawn to prepare breakfast for Jake, who started his work early to take advantage of the daylight hours. Emma would sleep until the sun was fully up, then join them in the main house for meals, and spend her days exploring the ranch under Sarah's watchful eye. The main house had indeed been in rough condition when they arrived. Dust covered every surface, dishes sat unwashed in the sink, and papers were scattered across every table. But Sarah tackled each room methodically, bringing order to the chaos while Emma played nearby or helped with simple tasks. "You're making this place look like a home again," Jake said one morning as he came in for lunch. The kitchen now sparkled, curtains hung clean and pressed in the windows. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. Sarah blushed at the compliment. "It just needed some attention. You must have been working so hard outside that you didn't have time to keep up with everything inside." Jake sat down at the table that Sarah had scrubbed until it gleamed. "My wife used to take care of all this," he said quietly. Sarah paused in her work of slicing the bread. Jake had never mentioned a wife before, and she realized how little Ashley knew about his past. "She died 4 years ago," he continued, his voice steady but distant. "Cancer. After she passed, I just focused on keeping the ranch running. Didn't seem important to worry about things like clean curtains and organized papers." "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. "That must have been very difficult." Jake nodded, accepting the sandwich she placed before him. "Margaret loved this place as much as I do. She would have liked seeing it cared for again. And she would have adored Emma." As if summoned by her name, Emma burst through the kitchen door, her cheeks pink from the cold air. "Mama, Jake, come see. Daisy is rolling in the dirt." They followed Emma outside to find the mare on her back in the pasture, legs in the air, wiggling back and forth in the dirt with obvious pleasure. Emma giggled at the sight while Jake chuckled. "She's giving herself a dust bath," he explained to Emma. "Horses do that to keep their skin healthy. Looks silly, but it's important for them." Emma watched with fascination as Daisy rolled over and stood up, shaking dust from her coat. "Can I give myself a dust bath too?" "I think regular baths with soap and water work better for people," Sarah said, laughing at her daughter's serious expression. These moments of simple happiness were becoming common at the ranch. Emma was thriving in the open space and fresh air, her cheeks growing rosy and her appetite returning. She followed Jake around when he did chores, asking endless questions that he answered with patience and humor. Sarah found herself looking forward to Jake's returns to the house throughout the day. He would check in during lunch, share stories about the animals, and listen to Emma's chatter about her discoveries. In the evenings, after Emma was asleep, he would sometimes sit by their fireplace, discussing ranch business or simply enjoying comfortable conversation. One evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Jake appeared at their cabin door with a concerned expression. "Storm's coming in fast," he said, looking at the heavy clouds gathering overhead. "Weather radio says it could be a bad one. I'd feel better if you and Emma stayed in the main house tonight, just in case." Sarah looked at the swirling snow, already beginning to accumulate. "Is that necessary? The cabin seems solid." "It is solid. But if we lose power, or if something goes wrong with the heating, you'd be too far away for me to help quickly. The main house has a generator and a wood-burning stove. You'd be safer there." Sarah hesitated. Living and working at the ranch was one thing, but staying overnight in Jake's house felt like crossing a line. She wasn't sure she was ready to cross. Jake seemed to understand her hesitation. "There are 2 guest rooms upstairs," he said gently. "You and Emma would have complete privacy. I just want to know you're both safe." Emma, who had been listening from behind her mother, stepped forward. "Mama, Can we? Maybe Jake will tell us stories about the ranch. Innocent hope in her daughter's voice decided it for Sarah. If you're sure we wouldn't be imposing? I wouldn't be imposing at all, Jake assured her. They gathered their things quickly as the snow intensified. By the time they reached the main house, the wind was howling and visibility was dropping rapidly. Jake helped them settle into the guest rooms upstairs, which were clean and comfortable, though clearly unused for some time. The bathroom is right across the hall, he said, showing them around. And there are extra blankets in the closet if you get cold. The heat should stay on, but the wood stove downstairs puts out good heat if needed. Downstairs, Jake built up the fire while Sarah prepared dinner. Emma sat at the kitchen table, coloring in a book that Jake had found somewhere in the house. Content and warm despite the storm raging outside. This is cozy, Emma announced, looking around the warm kitchen. It feels like a real family dinner. Sarah felt her cheeks warm at her daughter's innocent observation. But when she glanced at Jake, she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. For just a moment, he looked at them both with such longing that it made her heart ache. The power went out just as they finished eating, but Jake had been prepared. He lit several oil lamps, filling the house with soft, golden light that made everything feel intimate and peaceful. Tell us about when you were little, Emma asked Jake as they sat by the fire. Did you always live on a ranch? Jake settled back. In his chair, Emma curled up on a rug nearby with pillows, and Sarah in the chair across from him. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the house felt like a warm, safe haven. I was born in this house, Jake began. My grandfather built it with his own hands, and my father was born here too. When I was about your age, Emma, I had a pet calf named Button. Emma's eyes grew wide. A real baby cow? A real baby cow? She followed me everywhere like a big dog. My mother used to get so frustrated because Button would try to come in the house. As Jake told stories about his childhood, Sarah found herself studying his face in the firelight. She was beginning to understand that beneath his quiet exterior was a man who had known great love and great loss. The way he talked about his family, his wife, and the ranch revealed someone who valued connection and commitment above all else. The storm continued through the night, and Sarah fell asleep too. The sound of wind and snow against the windows, feeling safer than she had in months. Winter settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket, covering everything in silence. After the storm, Sarah and her daughter Emma moved back into their cabin. But something had shifted between them and Jake. He was no longer just an employer. They were starting to feel like a family. Emma took to ranch life effortlessly. She helped Jake feed horses, gathered eggs, and learned to recognize cattle by their markings. Ah! Her laughter echoed across snowy fields as she built snowmen with Jake joining in. Watching them together filled Sarah with joy and fear. Emma was bonding with Jake deeply. What would happen come spring when their help was no longer needed? Sarah's fears peaked one bitter February morning when she overheard Jake on the phone. I know it's been hard since Margaret died, a man said, but you can't isolate yourself forever. There are plenty of women in town. What about that new teacher? I'm not isolating myself, Jake replied. And I'm not ready to date. I have Sarah and Emma now, and they're all the company I need. His friend scoffed. You hired a housekeeper, not a family. Sarah slipped away, shaken. Evening, after putting Emma to bed, she knocked on Jake's office door. Jake, we need to talk, she said. I think it's time Emma and I look for something more permanent. I don't want you to feel stuck with us. He looked stunned. Where's this coming from? Heard you talking to your friend today. He's right. You hired a housekeeper, not a family. Emma and I shouldn't depend on you. Ow. Jake stood and walked to the window. Sarah, since you two came, this house feels alive again. Emma's laughter fills spaces that have been silent for 4 years. You've brought warmth and joy back. This isn't about obligation, but I'm not part of your world, she said. Someone like me doesn't get a fairy tale ending? Don't talk about yourself that way, Jake said fiercely. You think you're less deserving because you were desperate, because you'd do anything to feed your daughter? That makes you strong, not unworthy. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. I'm scared. Emma's getting attached to you. What happens when someone more appropriate comes along? Jake stepped closer. I love Emma like she's my own. I love you, Sarah, not out of pity, but because you're brave, kind. And you brought life back into this home. Sarah's breath caught. I don't know what to say. You don't have to, Jake said gently. Just know this isn't temporary for me. If you'll have me, I want to make sure you and Emma never worry about having a home again. Warmth in his voice reached places in Sarah she had long shut off. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe love might find her again, but the next morning tested everything. As Sarah made breakfast, 2 official vehicles arrived. A social worker named Mrs. Henderson had come to investigate. An anonymous complaint someone had reported that Emma was living in an inappropriate environment with unmarried adults and undocumented work arrangements. Jake's face darkened. He said it's about a child living with no legal structure, no employment records, no formal guardianship. Sarah felt sick. You're going to take her from me. No, they're not, Jake said. Mrs. Henderson spent 2 hours at the ranch, interviewing Sarah and Jake separately, touring the home, and observing Emma. Emma charmed her effortlessly, proudly showing her drawings, egg-collecting skills, and introducing Daisy the horse. Afterward, Mrs. Henderson said, Emma is clearly thriving. She's healthy, articulate, and happy. But there are some technical issues that must be resolved. You have 30 days to legalize your employment and housing arrangements. Otherwise, this could become a custody matter. After she left, Jake and Sarah sat in silence at the kitchen table. Who would have reported us? Sarah asked. Jake's jaw clenched. Tom mentioned our situation to folks in town. I think someone got the wrong impression. They think I'm living with you inappropriately, Sarah whispered. Jake nodded. But that doesn't matter. What matters is keeping you and Emma safe and together. Sarah's voice cracked. We should just leave. Start over where no one knows us. Jake reached for her hands. We're not running. There's one way to fix this permanently. He looked at her with steady eyes. Marry me. Sarah stared at him, heart pounding. Not just to solve paperwork, he said, because I love you, because I want to build a real life with you and Emma. I want to give you a home and a name no one can challenge. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Jake. He smiled softly. Say yes. Let's build something strong, real, and lasting together. And in that moment, Sarah knew this wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was a second chance she never expected, offered by a man who had lost everything and was still willing to love again. Sarah stared at Jake across the kitchen table, certain she had misheard him. What did you just say? I said marry me, Jake repeated, his voice steady and sure. I know it sounds sudden, but think about it, Sarah. If we're married, there's no question about our living arrangements. Emma would legally be my stepdaughter, and no one could challenge her place here. Sarah's mind reeled. Jake, you can't propose marriage just to solve a legal problem. That's not fair to either of us. I'm not proposing just to solve a legal problem, he said firmly. I told you last night how I feel about you and Emma. The social services issue just makes the timing more urgent than I planned. Sarah stood up from the table, pacing to the window. Outside, snow was falling again, covering the ranch in pristine white. This is crazy, Jake. We've known each other for less than 4 months. People don't build lasting marriages on such short acquaintance. My grandparents knew each other for 2 weeks before they got married, Jake said quietly. They were married for 53 years. Sometimes when something is right, you just know. But what if it's not right? What if we're just caught up? In the situation, the isolation, the drama of it all? Sarah turned back to face him. What if you wake up in 6 months and realize you've tied yourself to a woman with baggage you never bargained for? Jake stood up and walked over to her, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Sarah, look at me. Do you think I'm the kind of man who makes important decisions lightly? She shook her head. Everything about Jake Morrison spoke of careful consideration and deep commitment. I've been thinking about this since that night we rode out the storm together. When I watched you reading to Emma by the firelight, when I saw how gently you handled my memories of Margaret, when I realized that coming home each day meant coming home to you both, his voice grew softer. I love you, Sarah. Not because you need rescuing, but because you're strong and brave and kind. Not because Emma needs a father, but because she's brought joy back into my life that I thought was gone forever." Sarah felt tears starting again. "Jake, I care about you too. More than I thought possible. But marriage is such a big step, and let's take it one day at a time," he said simply. "We don't have to have everything figured out right now. We just have to be willing to try." Before Sarah could respond, Emma's voice called from the living room. "Mama, Jake, can you come here, please?" They found Emma standing by the front window, her nose pressed against the glass. "There's a car coming up the road," she announced. Jake looked out and frowned. "That's Tom's truck. Wonder what brings him out here in this weather." Tom knocked on the door a few minutes later, stamping snow off his boots as Jake let him in. He was a stocky man in his 50s, with kind eyes and a concerned expression. "Jake, I need to talk to you," Tom said, glancing at Sarah and Emma. "It's important." "Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Sarah," Jake replied firmly. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Well, all right then. Jake, I feel terrible about this, but I think I might have caused some trouble without meaning to. I was at Murphy's last night, and I overheard some folks talking about your situation here. Apparently someone called social services about Emma." Sarah's heart sank. So her suspicions had been correct. "I'm afraid it gets worse," Tom continued. "Linda Morrison heard the gossip and is pretty upset about it. She's been telling people that you're dishonoring Margaret's memory by having a woman and child living here so soon." Jake's expression darkened. Sarah realized that Linda Morrison must be a relative, probably from Jake's late wife's family. "Linda Morrison can mind her own business," Jake said coldly. "Jake, she's Margaret's sister. She loved Margaret too, and she's just protective of her memory. But she's got half the town talking now." Tom looked miserable. "I'm sorry, friend. I never meant for any of this to happen." Emma had been listening to the conversation with wide eyes. She slipped over to Sarah and took her hand, sensing the tension in the room. "Tom, I appreciate you coming out here to tell me," Jake said. "But my private life isn't up for discussion by the town gossips." "I know that, but Jake, think practically. If this keeps up, it could affect your business relationships, your standing in the community. Maybe the best thing would be to find Sarah and Emma a place in town until things cool down." Sarah felt her worst fears confirmed. The scandal was going to force them to leave, just when she was beginning to believe they could have a real life here. "Tom," Jake said, his voice deadly quiet, "I'm going to say this once. I want you to make sure everyone in town understands. Sarah and Emma aren't going anywhere. This is their home now. But Jake, be reasonable. The talk is already starting. To affect your reputation, then maybe it's time to give people something real to talk about," Jake said. He turned to Sarah, and she saw determination and love burning in his eyes. "Sarah, I asked you a question earlier. I'd like an answer." Sarah's breath caught. He was asking her to make this decision now, in front of Tom, with Emma listening. But as she looked at his face, she realized that he was giving her the chance to claim her place here publicly. To make it clear that this was her choice too, Emma tugged on Sarah's hand. "Mama, what question did Jake ask you?" Sarah knelt down to Emma's level, her heart pounding, but her mind finally clear. "Emma, sweetheart, Jake asked me to marry him. What'd you think about that?" Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "You mean Jake would be my real daddy? We could stay here forever with Daisy and the chickens?" "Yes, that's exactly what it would mean," Sarah said softly. Emma threw her arms around both Sarah and Jake. "Yes, yes, yes. Please say yes, Mama." "Ah." Sarah looked up at Jake, seeing all the love and commitment she could ever want reflected in his eyes. Then she looked at Tom's shocked face and realized that this moment would indeed give the town something to talk about. "Yes, Jake Morrison," she said clearly. "I'll marry you." Jake's smile could have lit up the entire ranch. He pulled both Sarah and Emma into his arms, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, Sarah felt completely at peace. Tom cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, I guess congratulations are in order then?" "Thank you, Tom," Jake said, not taking his eyes off Sarah. "And you can tell Linda Morrison and anyone else who's interested that Mrs. Sarah Morrison and I will be very happy on this ranch for the rest of our lives." 6 weeks later, on a brilliant March morning when the first signs of spring were beginning to show, Sarah Morrison stood at the kitchen window of the main house, watching her husband and daughter feed the horses together. Emma, now officially Emma Morrison, chattered away to Jake about her plans for a summer garden while Daisy nuzzled her pockets for treats. The social services case had been closed. Immediately after their wedding, Mrs. Henderson had attended the ceremony along with half the town, and pronounced Emma one of the luckiest children she had ever met. Sarah touched the simple gold band on her finger, still sometimes amazed that this was her life now. She had married Jake in a small ceremony at the ranch, with Emma as their flower girl and Tom as Jake's best man. Even Linda Morrison had eventually come around, admitting that seeing Jake happy again was what Margaret would have wanted most. As she watched Jake lift Emma up to sit on the fence rail, Sarah remembered that desperate night at Murphy's saloon when she had been ready to trade everything for a meal for her daughter. Now Emma had a father who adored her, a home where she belonged, and a future full of possibilities. Jake looked up and saw Sarah watching from the window. He waved and she waved back, her heart full of gratitude for the cowboy who had given them not just a home, but a forever family. Sometimes the most broken people find each other at exactly the right moment. And sometimes what looks like the end of everything is really just the beginning of the life you were always meant to have.